Look at your feeder right now. Full clean good seed, maybe a fresh bird bath next to it. Everything you were supposed to do, you did it, and your yard is still quieter than it was 2 years ago. Not a little quieter, noticeably quieter. That is not a coincidence, and it is not your fault. But it is something you need to understand, because the reason has nothing to do with what you put in the feeder and everything to do with what you took out of the yard. Tonight, we're breaking down what feeders actually do, a hidden stressor, hanging right on your porch that nobody talks about, and the one dead simple change that actually brings the birds back. Not just for today, but for years to come. Stay with me through all three, because if you only watch the first two and leave, you will walk away thinking the answer is to do less. It is not. The answer is to do something different. So let's start with the feeder. You bought the feeder because you wanted to help, and that is not a small thing. Most people walk past the bird section at the garden center and keep going. You stopped, you thought about it, you brought something home and hung it up and filled it and watched what showed up, and that matters. But here's the part nobody tells you at the garden center. Every bird at your feeder right now, every chickadee, every goldfinch, every cardinal was already living somewhere nearby. You did not create them, you did not save them. You gave them a reason to visit, and that is genuinely valuable, but it is not the same as what you think it is. Researchers who study backyard feeding have found something that surprises most people. Feeders do not increase the total number of birds in an area. They concentrate the birds that are already there. Pull the feeder down for 2 weeks, and those birds do not die. They go somewhere else. They were surviving before you, and they'll survive long after you're gone too. That is not an argument against feeders. It is an argument for understanding what feeders actually do and what they cannot do. Here is what a feeder cannot do. It cannot feed a nestling. A pair of chickadees raising one clutch of chicks needs somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars before those chicks leave the nest. Not seeds, not sweet. They need caterpillars, soft protein-dense alive. That is what the parents are hunting every single hour of every single day for about 2.5 weeks. Your black oil sunflower seeds play zero role in that process. So the question is not whether your feeder is good, it is. The question is where those caterpillars are supposed to come from in a yard that has been landscaped down to a lawn, a deck, and 3 ornamental shrubs from a big box store. That is the problem, and it is bigger than most people realize. Since 1970, North America has lost nearly 3 billion birds. That's a real stat from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. 1/3 of our entire bird population just gone in 50 years. The causes are real, and they are documented. Cats' windows, pesticides, climate, all of it is real. But the single largest driver, the one that underlies almost everything else, is habitat loss. We're talking about the loss of native plants from the places where people actually live. A single native oak tree supports more than 500 species of caterpillar and other insects. One tree, 500 species? That is not a metaphor, that is a food web. Now take that oak out of a suburban yard and replace it with a Bradford pear, which is what millions of American homeowners did over the past 4 decades, because they grow fast and look pretty for about 2 weeks in the spring. See, let's be honest, they also smell like rotting fish. They snap in every minor thunderstorm, and ecologically, they are a total dead zone, close to zero native insects. It produces fruit that birds cannot digest properly. It is from an ecological standpoint, a green sculpture. The lawn is the same story. A standard suburban lawn maintained fertilized short supports almost no insect life. No bugs, no babies, it's that simple. And without new generations, the whole population just collapses. Your feeder is sitting in the middle of all of this, doing its best. But your feeder is a vending machine in a neighborhood that used to be a forest. And the birds are not looking for a vending machine, they are looking for a neighborhood. Here's the sentence I want you to carry into the rest of this video. A feeder is where birds come to survive the day. Native plants are where birds come to actually live. Those are two different things. Before we get to the fix, and the fix is simpler than you think, I need to tell you about the thing on your porch. You might have wind chimes hanging outside. A lot of people do. They sound peaceful. They move in the breeze. They feel like exactly the kind of thing that belongs in a yard where you are trying to attract birds. Here is what is actually happening when those chimes are active. Scientists actually looked into this a few years back to see what constant background noise does to birds. What they found was pretty crazy. Birds stuck in noisy areas just couldn't raise their babies successfully. They ended up packing up and leaving their territories entirely. And the ones that stayed literally had to strain their voices, shifting their pitches, just to be heard over the racket. Look, I get it. Wind chimes sound peaceful to us. But here's the problem. Those metallic high-pitched tones, they sit right on top of the exact frequencies birds use for alarm calls and contact calls to communicate with each other. The call that says the coast is clear. The call that says a predator is nearby. The call that coordinates a group of chickadees moving through a yard together. When your chimes are active, those signals get lost in the noise. Think about what that means at a feeder. A bird lands to eat, and it is at its most vulnerable head, down focused on food exposed in the open. The safety of that moment depends entirely on the bird being able to hear its flock. If something moves in the bushes, one bird sounds the alarm, and every bird is gone in under a second. That system works because the communication is clear. Your wind chimes are static on the only radio channel that keeps them alive. This is not a reason. Feel bad about your wind chimes. It is a reason to move them. Not out of the yard, just away from the area where you feed and watch birds. Far enough that the interference clears, that is it. One afternoon of rearranging, and you have removed a stressor that your birds have been managing around for however long those chimes have been there. The birds will notice not immediately, but within a few weeks, the time they spend at your feeder will change. The comfort level changes. They stay longer, they come back sooner, because they can finally hear each other again. Now, the part that actually changes things. I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying rip out your feeder. I am not saying your lawn is ruined. I am not saying you need to spend thousands of dollars or hire a landscaper or tear up everything you have built out there. I am saying plant one thing. One native plant chosen for your region, placed somewhere in your yard where it has room to grow. That is the ask, just one plant. Here is why it matters more than almost anything else you could do. A serviceberry, which you can find at pretty much any native nursery for 30 to 60 bucks, produces small berries that ripen in late May and early June. That timing is not random. It is exactly synchronized with the spring migration window, when dozens of warbler and thrush species are making their massive spring migration up north. Those birds need high-calorie food at a very specific moment in the year. Serviceberry gives it to them. A feeder full of sunflower seeds does not, because what a warbler needs in May is not a seed, it is a fruit. And it is the caterpillars that hatch on serviceberry's leaves. You'll get American robins, cedar waxwings, and if you're in the right region, you might even see a Baltimore Oriole stop for half an hour on a Tuesday morning in May, before disappearing north. One serviceberry, that is what you planted to make that happen. A native holly does something different. It holds its berries through winter. When everything else is bare and frozen, and the easy food is gone, a holly with fruit on it becomes one of the most important structures in a suburban neighborhood. Hermit thrushes absolutely depend on it. Yellow-rumped warblers will spend days working a single tree. And bluebirds. They'll show up in a huge flock and strip the whole thing clean in a single afternoon. If you have a holly in your yard, and a neighbor has a holly in theirs, and someone 2 streets over has one, you have created a winter corridor. A chain of food and shelter that allows birds to move through a landscape that would otherwise offer them nothing. But if you want the absolute heavyweight champion for nesting birds, plant an oak. Any native oak, white oak, red oak, pin oak, bur oak. It depends on where you live. A young oak in a 5-gallon container costs $40 at a native nursery. You plant it in a corner of your yard. Where it has room, it grows slowly. In 5 years, it is a small tree. In 10 years, it is providing structure, shelter, and food in ways that no feeder ever could. Because that oak is going to support caterpillars, hundreds of species of them. And those caterpillars are going to feed every nesting pair of birds within a quarter mile of your yard. The chickadees you are watching at your feeder right now, their next generation depends on what is in the trees, not what is in the tube. One oak, that is a 50-year investment in every bird that will ever visit your yard. If you don't have space for a tree, look at perennials. Things like black-eyed Susans and native coneflowers give you seeds that persist through fall and into winter, and the kind of stem structure that song sparrows and dark-eyed juncos hunt through on cold mornings, picking insects from the dead stalks. Leave them standing through the winter. Do not cut them back in October. That is habitat. You just do not know it yet. You can even just look at native grasses like little bluestem or prairie dropseed. They provide nesting material and low shelter for ground-feeding birds. Indigo buntings nest in the transition zone between tall grass and open space. Field sparrows need exactly that kind of edge. You can create that edge with a few clumps of grass along a fence line. None of this is complicated. None of it requires a professional. It requires knowing what to plant and then planting it. The National Wildlife Federation has a native plant finder on their website. You enter your zip code and it gives you a list of plants that are native to your specific region with information about which birds and insects they support. It takes maybe 10 minutes. It completely skips the guesswork and tells you exactly what to buy. Let me bring this back to where we started. Your feeder is full? Your yard is quieter than it was? The feeder is not the problem. The feeder is doing exactly what a feeder does. It is pulling birds in from the surrounding area and giving them a reliable food source. That is real value. Keep it. Clean it every 2 weeks with a diluted bleach solution. Rinse it. Well, let it dry. Change to black oil sunflower seed if you haven't already. Keep the thistle seed stocked for the finches, even if those tiny seeds are a pain in the butt to clean up when they spill. Keep the suet up for woodpeckers, because at the end of the day, a feeder is just a snack. A native plant is a home. Move the wind chimes this week. That costs nothing, and it changes the acoustic environment of your yard immediately. Plant one native plant this season, just one. A serviceberry. If you want to see migrants, a holly. If you want winter birds, an oak if you are thinking 10 years out. And keep the feeder up. Because right now today, while that oak is still a sapling and the serviceberry is still getting established, the birds in your yard need something to eat this afternoon. That is what the feeder is for. You're not just building a yard to look at anymore. You're building a place for them to live. That is a different kind of project than filling a tube with seeds. It is slower, it is longer. It does not pay off this weekend. But in 5 years, the yard you'll have won't even look like the same property. It'll be alive. Tell me in the comments what is already growing in your yard that birds are using. I want to know what is working where you live. Native plants vary by region, and honestly, the tips in the comments are a gold mine, not just for me, but for everyone watching. And if you're dealing with a neighbor's cat, tell me about that too, because that is a whole separate conversation, and it is one this channel needs to have. The chickadee in your yard already knows every tree on your block, every shrub, every patch of cover. It has mapped your entire neighborhood and filed everything under safe or unsafe, useful or empty. Right now, most of what it is finding is empty. Plant the tree that is where you start.